Hello and welcome back to my channel. So in this video I thought I'd give a step-by-step guide on how to approach writing a personal statement. A personal statement is a very daunting task. I think it seems that there's so much writing on it and there's so much pressure on it that it's sometimes so difficult to even know where to start from. So I thought I'd give you a step-by-step guide, and I'd also read my personal statement that I wrote, and I got an offer to study law at Cambridge. So hopefully that gives some sort of indication of what maybe a good personal statement looks like. But look, disclaimer before we get started is all personal statements are very different. There's no one right way to do a personal statement, and there's no wrong way to do a personal statement. You could do it in so many different ways, and that's what I think makes it so tricky, is that you're constantly naturally comparing with what your fellow classmates or friends have done in school or college, and it's much harder because you think, oh, I haven't included that and they've included it, and it really does make it a bit harder. I'm gonna tell you how I approached my personal statement is just one way, and that's not necessarily the right way. Yours might look completely different and it might be amazing. So I think the key thing that you're trying to show through personal statements is passion. Passion is a key one, that you have a genuine interest in your subject. Number two, showing that you're suitable for that subject, that you've got the skills and that you would be a good match for this course, and also gripping in the reader. So people who are going to be reading your personal statements, they're going to have so many personal statements to read. There's so many thousands people who apply to your course, and if you're applying to subjects like law or medicine, they are competitive, so you need something that will make you stand out. So I think before I go into step-by-step of how I wrote mine, I'd like to go through do's and don'ts. So I've sort of touched on do's already, like show your passion, make sure you're engaging, make sure you can show why you're a suitable candidate. But at the same time, don't look for perfection, because you've got a limited time to write your personal statement. It's not something that you can work on, constantly. You do need to look for some degree of perfection, but I think if you get caught up in making it absolutely perfect and satisfied with it, you're never going to meet the deadline, especially if you're juggling your A-level subjects with it. Also, don't use cliches, don't use phrases such as ever since I was born or since I was 5-year-old, it's always been a lifelong dream, because realistically it would not have been, and those cliches are used constantly. With cliches, don't use quotes or famous quotes or things like that that are used by force. You need to make sure that you're using them if you have a real need for them, if they have actually inspired you. It's okay to use quotes, but I think they need to be genuine quotes that are unique to you and show something about you, and not just for the sake of it, because it doesn't really add anything to your personal statement. Also, don't try to write in fancy words or using fancy terms, fancy language, anything that doesn't show the way you actually speak, because it's unlikely that you're going to come by as your true self. And also remember, if you do have interviews, so I had a law interview at Cambridge, if you don't speak like your personal statement speaks, then I think it will cause a bit of a problem, and just again will come across as inconsistent and ingenuine. Finally, I think my other don't was, don't list things. Don't just go, I did this, I studied this, I did this extracurricular, I volunteered, I helped this person, because it doesn't show how you're suitable to do the particular degree that you're applying for. Whatever you've done needs to show what skill you've gained from it, and if you haven't gained any skills from it, or you can't talk about it as a very enlightening experience or a very useful experience, then I wouldn't include it. And the last thing was also that a lot of people are concerned with work experience. I had done work experience at the end of my GCSE, so in year 11, but again I didn't find it particularly useful. It wasn't a particularly insightful work experience, so I didn't include it in my personal statement. The general consensus is that obviously with the pandemic, it's been difficult to get any work experience to go into court, so you don't need to worry about that. There's so many different ways that you can show your interest or your passion. So that was everything, I think. And also, if you're looking at books to read, you know, it's important that you do actually read the book, especially if you have interviews, because if not, then if you get questioned on it, then it's likely that you will be caught out. And also, it's important to remember that don't put in a book and say I'll read it if I get an interview or at a later date, because there's so much more you have to do at the later date, and you really will struggle trying to fit that in as well. A lot of people do it, a lot of people do manage to do it, but it is very stressful, and I think it's better to avoid the stress. One way, I only wrote one book in my personal statement. I had read several, but I only put in one because I was applying to Cambridge and I was aware that I could, you know, be called for an interview. But at the same time, I added different interests. So I added an article that I had read. I think it was about an 8 to 9 page article, and that's another way of showing your interest, which I think is more helpful because it's not very long and it's very easy to summarize and keep on top of. So I would always go articles over books, but it's important to at least have one book that you have read, and not for the sake of your personal statement, but also to show or like confirm that you do actually have an interest in that subject. So now moving on to how I step by step wrote my personal statement. So I knew that I wanted to apply to Cambridge, so my deadline was 15th October, which is much earlier than the actual UCAS deadline, which I think is in January. So I started thinking about it at the end of July, as school prompts you to, but I actually really started writing it in mid-August, towards the end of August. So to start with, what I did was I wrote a list of everything I wanted to include in my personal statement. So I included all the extracurricular activities I had done that I thought might be useful. So I had done a Young Enterprise programme, I had gone to a Young Lawyer programme, I had volunteered as a tutor for underprivileged students, I had entered the Kingsley Napley's Legal Apprentice competition. So anything that I had done, I wrote it down. Any documentaries I'd watched, I remember I watched The Rise of the Murdoch Dynasty, and I found some links to law with that, so I wrote that down. So literally just brainstorm anything that you have done, and I think that's such a useful exercise, because then you can clearly see on one page what you have done and what you could include. And then, you know, if you can link all that to law or to medicine or to computer science or whatever subject that you're applying to, keep it. If there's something that you think, okay, I don't really want to include this because it didn't really help me, I don't think it'll add much value, that you can get rid of it. But I wouldn't suggest getting rid of loads of things at this stage from your list. I didn't, so then I got everything and I kept that with me, because it's good to know that you have done this, and so you don't miss anything out that could be of real value. And then my second step was to create sort of mind maps and bullet points of my ideas, because it's very hard to just sit there and start writing something. It doesn't come naturally, especially when you don't know much about the subject you're going to study. I mean, you know, you can say you have an interest in it, but realistically you don't know what the subject will actually contain or consist of. So then I mind mapped sort of the structure of my personal statement. So the introduction, you know, second, third, fourth, fifth paragraph, I think I had about 5 or 6 paragraphs. So my first paragraph, the introduction, has to be gripping. You need to engage a reader and draw them in straight away. You need to, you know, stand out, be unique, and show them that you have a real interest. And it doesn't have to be complicated at all. It can be very, very straightforward, very easy. It doesn't have to be this complex idea. Mine was very simple. It was about the law affecting everyone, and how, you know, the law is such a huge part in our lives, and that would seem very obvious, but it interested me, and then I could link that interest to a wider sort of theory or a wider idea. My A-level subjects, you know, made me a good fit for law, so I did English literature, economics, history, and government and politics, and these were all essay writing subjects. And, you know, law is heavily based on essays, analytical skills, and I thought that I had really learned a lot from my A-level, useful for a law degree. So if you can link your subjects in, that's a great way to show that that you would be a suitable candidate. Again, I'll read my personal statement and I can show you exactly how I incorporated that. But again, whilst you're mind mapping, be aware that even if you've done like science subjects and you're applying to something that isn't necessarily a science related degree, you can always link it to something that is useful or that will make you a suitable candidate. And then again, whilst you're mind mapping, think about why you would be a good fit. So think of it as you having another person next to you. Why would they want to choose you over the next person? And then once I had done my sort of basic baseline mind mapping, bullet points, whatever suits your style, you need to then bring in focus. So if you're talking about extracurricular activities or you're talking about your subjects, that can be quite generic. Everyone could possibly come up with writing the same ideas, the same points. So what you then need to do is bring in focus and make it more personal. I mean, it is called a personal statement. It's all about you and you should make it all about you. So bring in focus, so make it personal. So what is your motivation? You know, what is your interest? And that's what your introduction should really get at. Why are you interested in it? Not because this is what law is, or not because this is what medicine is, or not because this is about helping people, but what is it about helping people that you like? What is it about the law that interests you? What is it about this subject that motivates you, that you have, you know, that incites that excitement within you? And that's really important. It's hard to think of, especially if you're going in to study a brand new subject. But again, that's why reading around your subject, reading books, will bring up ideas and things that you wouldn't have thought of and it would have interested you. And you know, if it's personal, it could be like a personal experience. So if you've grown up with a life that's been associated with the law, like you've been involved in the law, or you know, if you've had a good experience, a bad experience, bring in your experiences, make it personal. And it can even be academic. I didn't have any personal reason as such because I hadn't ever been involved directly with the law, but I brought in my academic interests. I did politics, and in that we looked at the UK Constitution, the relationship between the Constitution and, you know, the citizens. We looked at the Gina Miller cases, incited an interest in me about constitutional law, so that's what I focused in. And I think it's so much easier if you use an area of law or an area of your subject that you're interested in, because then you can really focus on it and it shows that you have a real interest within your subject. So, you know, it could be anecdotal, you could tell a story, and that's quite an effective way because that would be unique to you. Also ask yourself, you know, list 3 things in your life that link to your subject. So I thought of 3 ordinary things that I did in my life or that was prevalent in my life, and I linked them to law, because then it shows that you're constantly thinking about your subject, you're constantly able to make links, and you're so interested that even if something isn't obvious in your life that it links to your subject, you can still see that link. But remember, don't make it forced, you know, don't make unnecessary links, only if you can. So at your mind mapping stage here, you're still mind mapping, bullet pointing, making your points and thinking about ideas, your structure. And then once you've brought in focus, you've got some ideas about, you know, a personal experience, an academic experience, your interests, you've clarified, you've made links with, you know, your extracurricular activities, your supercurricular activities, or your A-level subjects, and, you know, you've made links and you can clearly see what you want to write about these subjects. Then what you need to do is start writing. And this is one of the hardest things. I mean, sitting there and just writing something about, you know, why you're interested in a subject is so difficult. It took me ages to get started on my first one. I didn't know how I wanted to start, but you just need to sit down and write something. Just write it out. Don't worry about the word count, don't worry about how many characters you have, how many paragraphs you're writing. Just sit there and write. You don't have to write it all in one go, but, you know, give yourself a time. In 1 hour I want to try to get an introduction done, and just write it. And what I found was very useful, having drafts. So I had about 12 or 13 drafts. So I did one draft, and then once I had written a whole personal statement, even if it was over the word count, I'd move on to doing a second one. But I wouldn't, when I went on to do my second one, I would do it as a new document and save it as a new document, because then you can see your progress. And I was really worried that I'd written something really good, and then if I tried cutting it down, I'd lose that part. So by keeping different drafts, you can always go back, and if you liked something and that you'd written previously, you can always just copy and paste it. So that's a very useful exercise. And also, when you have different drafts, share it with your friends, your family, your teachers. They're more than happy to help you. Read your drafts, and then you can improve it, and then it's easy to see the comparisons on progress, and I think having different drafts clearly shows that. But remember, you don't have to have a certain number of drafts. You can have 5 drafts, you can have 4 drafts. It's completely up to you. It really just depends on how much time you're taking on it. And sometimes you write something the first time and you think it's amazing, and that can happen, but more often than not it doesn't. So it's important that you do have drafts. So yeah, so that was my step-by-step guide, and I do hope that helped and I haven't rambled on for too long. So now I think what I'd like to do is read my personal statement, and then I'd also like to show you the comparison of my first draft and my last draft to show you how much progress has been made. Okay, here it goes. Law affects everyone, regardless of whether they are aware of it. It plays a huge role in protecting society, yet it discriminates based on socio-economic status. Therefore, I question the reliability of the law as a mechanism of protection. Studying law will allow me to explore how systemic weaknesses can be resolved. So that was sort of my personal interest in the law. I was very much aware that the law, plays a role in everyone's life. But then I was aware of the injustices within the legal system, and that was my focus. I was questioning, how reliable law actually was, or how useful a tool it was in protecting citizens. And then I, in my next paragraph, go on to talk about this injustice in a bit more detail. I saw this injustice through a 2-tier system of access divided by one's wealth. Cuts in legal aid mean that individuals who cannot afford the high fees for representation are forced to represent themselves, causing a miscarriage of justice. I want to explore why indirect discrimination exists, as it destroys the principle of the rule of law. So again, this is now a real life example that I'd seen and that I am now focusing on, because I've talked about injustices. Now I was exploring that injustice to show this is the area that really hooked me on law, or really sparked that interest for law. Government and politics gave me an understanding of our constitution, initiating my interest in constitutional law. I agree with Mark Elliott's article, Brexit, a Constitutional Moment, that Brexit will not directly impact parliamentary sovereignty, but may alter the territorial constitution. This change will damage Westminster's position as sovereign, resulting in the diminution of the UK. I think the outcome would be, at the very least, uncertainty during this transitional period. So now I brought in my A-level subjects to show what sparked my interest in constitutional law. And then Mark Elliott's article was the one I read, and it was about Brexit and how that will alter the sort of position of the UK and position of Westminster as sovereign, and showed that I understood what the article was talking about. And I also showed what I thought about it would be, and it's important to use these phrases like "I think," "in my opinion," or "this makes me think," because then it shows that you're actually engaging with the text and you can form your own opinions. I was interested in the section on constitutional law in What About Law. The Terrorism Act 2005 illustrated how liberty is exchanged for protection, raising the question of how valuable such legal protection is, as these rights are supported by a legally fragile foundation, since the UK Constitution is uncodified and unentrenched. History and English taught me strong research skills, critical thinking, and how to dissect complex ideas. Studying Napoleon, I saw how the law legitimised the abuse of power, weakening the fight for revolutionary ideals, disadvantaging many and focusing on the wealthy. Thus, the Napoleonic Code worked based on socio-economic discrimination legitimised by being the law. Economics taught me to consider the wider picture to see wealth diversity which impacts the economic system. These understandings are transferable as injustices, economic or legal, are likely to be the result of ineffective systems. The Young Lawyer Programme and the Kingsley Napley's Legal Apprentice Competition improved my analytical skills in a simulated murder trial, and writing a witness statement where the need to evaluate a complex situation was vital. Highly commended for an essay competition by the John Locke Institute answering, do underlying principles of common law require juries to be informed about jury nullification? I argue that juries should be informed based on the rights of man and that the common law should apply to modern times. Although jury nullification may result in hung juries, leading to an unreliable system, I believe that these concerns are overridden by the need to uphold democratic values, which may diminish if juries are not aware of all their rights. Volunteering as a tutor to underprivileged students, I focused on adapting my instruction and communication to different learning styles to achieve beneficial results. The Young Enterprise Project strengthened my collaborative and team-building skills. As an English prefect, I learned to manage time well, be responsible and work independently. I also enjoy baking as a creative outlet. I became aware of legal implications and requirements. As tutoring required a DBS check to protect children and when buying ingredients, I saw how imported products have to comply with domestic regulations. The law is largely positive, but injustices are prevalent in the judicial system, and I hope to delve deeper into these flaws. I am keen to study law as I want to make a positive impact, and I believe that there is no other field of study which so profoundly pervades society. Law is an amalgamation of legal, philosophical, moral and practical issues, so I am eager to partake in intellectual discussions. I am excited about pursuing a law degree, and I believe my adaptability and ability to work hard will allow me to succeed. So that was my personal statement. So I think now let's compare my first draft to my final draft. So my first draft started like this. It depends, a lawyer's favourite phrase. This ambiguity sparked my interest in law. The complexity of the judicial system intrigues me as the impact of law is widespread, yet the implementation of the law seems to be placed in the hands of individuals who are directed by their own beliefs and opinions. This led me to question the importance of the law, but also the relationship between citizens and legal institutions. So now you can see how different this is to my final one. I mean, I more clearly talk about the socioeconomic discrimination, and I'm much more less wordy, more concise. And then if I show you what I wrote about my subjects, I had a huge paragraph on how my subject helped me. A-level studies have also stimulated an interest in studying law. In history, I learnt the importance of research and looking at both sides of the argument, weighing them in terms of their credibility and reliability. Looking at the legal reforms that Britain undertook from the 1950s, such as the Equal Pay Act, Race Relations Act, and reducing the voting age from 21 to 18, I became aware of how different laws have shaped the society in which we live today. And like I say in the final one, I didn't talk anything about these. I just focused on Napoleon because I thought that was actually the best sort of image or illustration of the point I was trying to make. My English literature course forced me to engage with all sorts of texts, from Shakespeare's Othello to poems of the decade, developing my analytical skills and ability to dissect complex ideas. Studying government and politics has given me a fundamental foundation to understanding our constitution, but more importantly, initiated my interest in constitutional law as I was fascinated by the relationships between different institutions and the impact of the separation of powers. Economics is a crucial subject which taught me the importance of looking at the wider picture and very much fits in with the phrase, it depends. The lack of a straightforward answer meant that I was forced to look at different factors, considering different outcomes and evaluating my choices, which I think fits the academic study of law as the answer is not clearly written but it's an amalgamation of several factors, making each case unique. All these subjects have allowed me to understand complex concepts, developing an argument and being open to new ideas. See, a lot of this one was very waffly, didn't really link to what I was trying to get across, but it was the first thing that came into my mind. I was writing it. So I think what I'm trying to go from this is that write what comes to your mind, because it gives you your foundation ideas, but over time, this was my first draft I just read to you, and the one I just read to you before, or my final one, was my 13th draft. So I took so many drafts until I got to the end point. So take your time and just take each paragraph, each draft at a time, and hopefully it should be all okay. So in my next video, in particular for law, because I mean, I focus on law, I will be telling you what sort of books to read or what articles to read, and hopefully that will give you more of an insight, because I think this video has gone on for long enough. So I hope this video was useful, and if you have any questions, please feel free to put some questions in the comments below and I'll be more than happy to help you.